What's up, everybody? How's it going? Let me know if you can hear me. And long time no see. I'm using a different webcam, a different monitor, a different microphone in a different room, and same hair though still. Let me know if everything's working, and I shall carry on. Long time no see, Jane. Well, everybody, I'm here in Shanghai, China. Unlike most of the people who are so strongly opinionated about what's happening in this city, I'm actually here. And I went to a protest the other day, or tried to go to a protest to check it out. And it kind of got me thinking about hair reflection is blinding? How dare you? It kind of got me thinking about protests in China and kind of the way that we talk about it and how people think about protests in China and the misconceptions that people have. I took a couple of notes for myself because I'm very forgetful. So happy Tuesday, everybody. And like I said, I'm here in Shanghai. The weather is horrible. It's drizzly, overcast, and cloudy. It was raining yesterday. It's raining a little bit right now, but I don't mind it. Derek Lee, how are you recently? Thank you for asking. I'm okay. I'm burnt out as always, but a little bit, feeling a little bit better. A little bit invigorated, I guess you could say. So I am trying a new way to stream. So if you just came from my Nathan Rich live channel, you're probably wondering why that stream just ended. That's because I screwed up a setting. Long story short, still working it out, but this is my primary channel. I don't like to live stream on this channel because my live streams are all in English and they're sort of rambly and not really to the point. So in the future, I will live stream to a live channel and I will edit down that live stream into some hopefully more cohesive and coherent arguments and or videos and post them on my main channel. So please go and subscribe to Nathan Rich Live, which, do I even have a link for that? Of course not. Why would I be prepared? That's crazy talk. Anyway, search it out. You do all the work. I do nothing. Find my other channel. Maybe next time I'll have a link to it. So streaming, yes. I have a lot of things to say about protests in China, obviously, because I've been here for over 10 years and I've seen a lot of protests across the world, including in China before. And I spent a lot of time studying China, especially modern history, especially the events that have led up to China being how it is today. And a lot of that has to do with protests. So tons of things to say. Could talk literally for days straight about this subject, but I'm not going to. I'm going to spare you your valuable time. I've been to protests in Bangkok. I was there around maybe 2013 or so. I was there. I picked up a T-shirt. But I realized later I don't know what the T-shirt says, so I don't dare wear it because I don't know what I'm allegedly supporting by wearing it. But I still have a Thai protest T-shirt from back then that, fits me perfectly. Trust me, it's not at all stretched to the max when I stick it on my body now. So I've seen protests down there. I went back another time. There was protests there as well, unrelated to those first protests. I've seen protests in America. Obviously, I've been to protests in America, although I have not participated in protests because I don't. I have a whole. There's a whole reason that I don't participate in protests, but I'm not against people protesting in general. And I've seen protests in China. I went to rather large protests in around 2013 or so in Xi'an. I took a lot of footage. I filmed a lot of what was going on. And that was one of the catalysts for my interest in why the West represents China in such a weird way and sort of investigating that. Because the protests that I went to, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And there was, I would say, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of police officers down the streets, everywhere. There was tons of opportunity for violence, and there was actually very little violence at all. And the police didn't try to shut down the protests, actually. They just tried to contain them and not let it get out of control. I was very surprised because in America, these types of protests get shut down with tear gas and, police riding up on horses and flares and arrests and zip ties and beatings and cars running over crowds of people, and it can get quite crazy. It definitely can get crazy in China as well. But the one I was at in Xi'an, it was nothing like that at all. Very little violence. And so it got me interested in how come I don't ever hear about that type of thing in the West. So anyway, I've been around a lot of protests. I tried to go to a protest the other day. I can't remember if it was last night or the night before because I'm very busy. But I basically wandered over to see, okay, what's all the hubbub, what's going on. And I eventually got to a cross street that just had police, sort of blocking the entrance and diverting traffic. So that's what I personally saw. And I tried to go around a bit. I didn't see anything exciting going on. I couldn't hear anything, which means that there definitely was not more than, I'd say, 100 or so protesters. Because if you've ever seen like real protesters, real big protests, you can hear it. It's very, very loud. You can hear it for many blocks even. So there was definitely some people protesting, allegedly, but I didn't see any. Now, somebody's asking in chat, haven't you seen videos online? Cops beating people up in Shanghai. I haven't really been looking. I saw a couple of people got arrested. I saw a BBC reporter, the second half of him being detained. I didn't see the first half, but I saw the second half. Looked shockingly soft from the police. I actually couldn't believe how soft they were on him, because if you look at Europe or the United States, I mean, it is quite brutal how they treat dissenters these days. And it wasn't always like that, by the way. It wasn't as bad, I think, when I was younger. So it's gotten quite a bit worse. So I want to talk a little bit about these protests and how I view them, because I have my own views. So I've got my notes here. I'm just looking. So the way I want to do it, though, is I want to start with this tweet that I tweeted out called that says, what does it say? I tweeted this. Let me share my whatchamacallit. Left monitor. Okay. I tweeted this. It's the duty of the Chinese government to reflect the will of the people in its laws and policies. And it is the duty of Chinese citizens to follow those laws and policies. Both of them must be in sync for stability and prosperity. Now, this is about the most neutral thing you could possibly say about the situation in China in general when it comes to power balance and how stability is met. This is a dual-sided comment of, look, the Chinese government has to make sure that what they're doing is reflecting the will of the people, the masses. And the masses have to make sure that what they're doing is being part of the system and not trying to break it, essentially. And both of these things have to be in sync. They have to be happening at the same time and at a appropriate level for stability and prosperity to happen. This is a very straightforward, easy to understand concept. I mean, I don't understand how anyone could think that this is weird or one-sided or anything. But this type of tweet is very interesting because it's almost a litmus test it's almost like when you see this tweet, what you get from it tells me a lot about who you are. Because I'm not saying anyone is responsible or not responsible. I'm not putting any blame anywhere. I'm just saying that historically speaking, modern history and the way that China works, both of these things need to be happening at the same time for stability and prosperity. That's it. And that's pretty true as far as I can tell. And the replies that I get, I guess they're the following tweets, or I don't know what they're called, but the replies that I got is just a lot of crazy hate. Now, I normally get a lot of hate on the internet anyway. People think that I care about their online hate, which is cute. But the thing that's interesting about this is, for them to hate on me, that means they have to have read this and only understood or sided with one half of it. They have to have read this and thought, oh, what he's saying is everything is the fault of the people, and the people can't protest because it's all their fault, which is not at all what I said. It's shocking to me. So it just goes to show you that some people are so biased and so unaware of what a neutral comment even looks like that they come to something that is so obviously right down the middle, and they only choose to understand one half of it just so they can complain and call other people names. It's very interesting to me. So all these people who are calling names and giving out hate, it just really is a shocking and interesting part of the human psyche to see how weak that they've let themselves become intellectually. I mean, it's this comment is exactly as it's putting exactly as much onus on the government as it is on the protesters, as it is on the citizens, as it is on anyone that's in here in China. And yet people choose to only understand one side, and it's just it tells you a lot about who they are. Anyway, so I want to move on from that. The reason that I tweeted this, by the way, is that I support, in theory, almost any protest that can happen in China. I support demonstrations in China by Chinese people. And by support, I mean I don't go after them and, speak out against them and say that they're wrong. It doesn't mean I think that they're right in whatever they're pushing for. But I think that they should be allowed to do so because it is in accordance with the Chinese Constitution. So that's what I think we should talk about now, is the rights of people in China to protest and what that means. So I've pulled up the Constitution of China. Sorry, let me move that. Let me switch you guys back here so you're not looking at my every move. So I have the Chinese Constitution up, and I thought I kind of went through it the other day, and I thought it'd be nice to do a whole video about this Constitution. It's very, very interesting, and it tells you so much about modern China, and it answers so many questions of why does China do this, why does China do that, why do they act this way or have these feelings, why does the government act this way, why do the people get angry about this or push for that. You just read the Constitution, it tells you a lot about how this country was set up. So first what I want to do though is I want to show you guys just a quick tiny little thing from the German Constitution that I just happened upon. So here we go, just for 2 seconds here. This is the German Constitution, and I want you to see this part. Article 5, freedom of expression. Every person can freely express and disseminate his opinions, yada, yada, yada. Freedom of the press and freedom of reporting, yeah. There shall be no censorship. Okay, so that is in the German Constitution. Now, of course, if you're familiar at all with Germany, you'll know that they have a lot of censorship. I mean, most recently, I think they banned the letter Z. I don't know if they've lifted that ban, but they banned it. So that's completely against the Constitution. But why is that okay? Why do we not just, have endless articles complaining about how Germany banned Z? I mean, their constitution says right here, there shall be no censorship. It's very plain. The reason is that this being in conflict with other basic rights, the other rights will generally take precedence. Okay? Pretty easy to understand. Look, guys, it's a Western white country, so you guys can all get behind that, right? Because that's where we apparently look for our signals on what's okay. So they're doing that here. They're saying there shouldn't be censorship, and then they are censoring anyway because other rights and other guarantees from the Constitution are being encroached upon by somebody's non-censorship. So that's what they're doing. Now let's take a look at the United States Constitution. So the Bill of Rights, rather. So the Bill of Rights here, we can see where am I? Right here. The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, what this means is, essentially, if you are granted rights or abilities in these documents, that doesn't mean you can now erase someone else's rights because of that. So obviously this is not super clear, and it's up to courts and judges and everything to figure out what exactly that means. But the point is, we also in America have the same concept of just because you have a right doesn't mean you necessarily can just do that forever. If you are blocking someone else's rights, that can be an issue. So when we look at the Constitution of China, which is a very interesting document, especially this preamble is super interesting. You guys should all read this sometime. Anyway, I've got some of these articles noted. Article 33. Every citizen shall enjoy the rights prescribed by the Constitution and the law and must fulfill the obligations prescribed by the Constitution and the law. So part of this is that everybody has to follow the law, right? Article 35, this is something that you'll see brought up online a lot. People will say, citizens of the PRC shall enjoy freedom of speech, the press, assembly, association, procession, and demonstration. So, freedom of speech and demonstration and the press are the three that the Western media will focus on the most. So the way freedom of speech works in China in a nutshell is that you can say whatever you want, but if you are publicly pushing an opinion or publicly commenting in a way that has a large audience, generally that will be understood to mean you want to start something. You want to make something bigger. You want to amplify your message. And okay, so far so good. So according to only this sentence, you should just be able to do that no matter what you're saying. Okay? Article 35. Article 41 says basically citizens have the right to criticize and make suggestions regarding any state organ or state employee. A state organ is like a division, basically, of the government. And you have the right to file complaints, etc., but they shall not fabricate or distort facts to make false accusations. So this is used often to censor or to block messages, is that they say, well, this is essentially fake news. What you're saying is not correct. It's not true. So that's one way that the government does censor, is they use this line, this line from the Constitution. And then we've got Article 51, which says, this is something, by the way, though people on the internet bring up Article 35, they never bring up Article 51. They only care about certain parts of the Constitution. Article 51 says, when exercising their freedoms and rights, citizens of the PRC shall not undermine the interests of the state, society, or collectives, or infringe upon the lawful freedoms and rights of other citizens. What this means is you have freedom of speech so long as you are not undermining the interests of the state or the society or the collectives or infringing upon the lawful freedoms and rights of other citizens. So you have free speech, but it's quite limited. I know those seem very contradictory, and in some ways they are, but every country does this. So does China do this more than other countries? In some circumstances, yes. However, none of this takes away from the fact that Chinese people are allowed to demonstrate, and they demonstrate quite often. Since I've been here, which is over 10 years, I've seen in the news and the local news, I've been to many, many protests, a lot of them. There's a lot. And every single time that they're reported in the West, it's always rare protest, almost unheard of in China, so kind of interesting. So that's why I support the protesters. It's that if they're following the law, and if they're not trying to put out a message or use one of their rights to go against the state, society, collectives, or infringe upon the lawful freedoms and rights of other citizens, if they're not doing that, then I absolutely support their right to be out there demonstrating. And I don't see how anyone, Chinese or otherwise, could disagree with that. Now, if you want to go outside of that, let's say that you're like a libertarian type of person and you think for some reason that China needs to be how you think the world should be, and you think that it's okay for people to violate the Constitution and to push against the state, society, or collectives, et cetera, if you think it's okay for them to push against that, then I would say this. They have the right as humans to attempt that, but it is against the Constitution, it is illegal, and it definitely will have consequences. And the consequences are they will be immediately branded as revolutionaries, counter-revolutionaries rather. They'll be marked as being against the government, being against the society, and being against the Communist Party. And that has happened before. There have been protests where they're predominantly against the state. And every time that happens, something interesting happens that, again, nobody wants to talk about. As soon as that happens, all the state media does is they just report what happened. They just go, oh, yeah, these protesters said that they hate Mao, or they hate the government, or they hate whatever. They're pushing for anarchy. And you know what happens? All of the people in the country just immediately drop support for that group. They go, okay, well, screw you. Generally, that's what happens. And that's why when you look at protests in China, if they're serious protests, almost always you have the core message of them being socialism. They sing La Social or whatever that what is that thing called? The International. Sorry, what did I say? La Social. That's a club. They sing international socialism songs. They're pushing for socialism and communism, but they want reform and change within it. That's what they're always pushing for, because they understand that people in China know enough about history to know if you want to change the way somebody was elected, or you want reforms, or you want less corruption, or you want this or that, that's one thing. But if you want to take us back to the Stone Age that we were in before 1949, then you don't have our support, especially the older generation. They literally remember what it was like in the early days of the PRC and before, where, I mean, there's no way they would ever support going back to that. Never. So there's a million things I could say. In general, though, what I will say is I support the right as aligned with the Chinese Constitution of Chinese people to demonstrate. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with them. Whatever they're protesting about doesn't mean I agree, right? I tried to go to those protests to see what it was like. I wanted some firsthand experience with it. But there's a big difference between agreeing with somebody and agreeing that they have the legal right to do something. If they're nonviolent and they're not violating the laws and the Constitution of China, then I'll support them to do that. I personally don't think it's going to achieve much by itself, but, hey, I'm not their boss. I'm not in charge of Chinese people. I'm just a guy here observing things around me and commenting sometimes. So they're going to do what they're going to do. Personally, I think they should be allowed to do whatever they want as long as they're following the law. So when it comes to this COVID thing, when it comes to the lockdowns and the how do you say it in English? The health code scanning and all that kind of stuff. I've been here the whole time, just so you guys are aware. I mean, I have been here every second of COVID. I've not left China for 1 second. So I've been in Beijing, I've been in Shanghai, I've traveled around a little bit within China, but the point is, I've been here with everybody. I've been getting the same, going and doing the same test again and again and again. I've seen dumb things happen, like where you're just sitting at home and then they make you test again, even though there's no, how could I suddenly get it again? There's all kinds of dumb things that happen. But all those things together, to me, myself, personally, it's not that big of a deal. I don't really care that much. So it's not that big of a deal. Now, when you talk about things that are a big deal, like the Chinese, do you like being locked at home? I'm not locked at home. I don't know what you're talking about. When you talk about things that are a big deal, like a fire in Xinjiang where people are dying, and then you have the people on the internet who are attributing that to COVID measures and this kind of thing. Those are serious. That, to me, those are two very different things. Personally, again, I'm speaking from my personal view. I'm not telling you what I think Chinese people should think or what they do think. I'm talking about me. I know this is very hard for people to understand. This is how I see things. To me, if there was any kind of COVID restrictions that were influencing the outcome of that fire, that's a huge, to me, that's a travesty, and that's a scandal, completely. Being told that I have to scan a green code before I go in and get lunch is just not the same level of scandal to me personally. Okay? Now, I think the real reason that these protests are happening is more or less a natural reaction to the experience of COVID here in China. The experience of COVID in China it really fluctuates, to be honest with you. It's nothing like what people outside of China think, first of all, as made clear, even by comments in this chat. People are still saying things like, he's locked up. People just don't really understand. First of all, it's different everywhere in China. And even in the same place in China, it's different within a neighborhood in that same place in China. So everyone's experience is different. But in addition to that, the time span is also very different. I mean, being here in Shanghai, when the entire city was completely locked down, was miserable. It was a very miserable experience. It sucked. But in a way, for me personally, it was a lot less miserable than being in certain parts of Beijing a couple years before. Even though it wasn't as locked down, we could still go outside. But it was just the feeling in the air was worse because we really thought okay, this COVID is super dangerous. Everybody has it, Back when people were wearing masks on masks on masks, with a plastic bag over their head. That was in a way a worse feeling. So anyway, I'm rambling. The point is, all of these things have combined over the last few years to be just an extremely unpleasant and somewhat miserable experience for a lot of people. And Chinese people in general are extremely hardy, meaning they can take a lot of beating. And they've been beat down by COVID, by the restrictions, by COVID itself, and by the lockdowns, by everything. So I get it. To me, these protests are a natural reaction to that. I read an article that I also posted about briefly on Twitter and said, this article is quite neutral, something like that. And I got people saying like, no, it isn't. You're a shill. You're this, you're that. The article is very interesting, though, because it's one of the few articles that mentions something about these protests and something about the lockdowns and everything like that, which is that they essentially say there's an additional problem to this, which is that if China just undoes all of the restrictions and says, okay, have at it, COVID. There's a lot of hospitals in rural areas. There's a lot of sectors and a lot of elderly homes and organizations that would be potentially completely overrun, and there'd be a lot of dead people. So this is the other side to the protest, right? Which is that yes, the restrictions are very tedious and each individual thing is really not a big deal, but over time it is very draining and sort of miserable. But on the other hand, I still, to this day, it is November 29th, 2022. I've been in China the entire time of COVID. I have not yet, not one time, ever, that I know of, been face-to-face with someone who has ever had COVID-19. Okay? I know nobody believes that, but that's just an actual fact. So we don't have COVID statistically. We're getting more of it. We may eventually get it. Currently, we don't have it. So I still believe that China has saved a lot of lives by doing what it's done. And if the Chinese people, I don't even necessarily agree that this is the case, but if the Chinese people decide that enough is enough and we don't want any more COVID restrictions and we're ready for those old people to die so that we don't have to live through this misery, if that's the decision that they make, then it is the duty of the Chinese government to react to that appropriately. So for all you name-calling morons out there on Twitter, I hope you understood what I just said, because it's quite clear to me. It is their response. It is their duty to respond accordingly. I don't necessarily think that it's at that point now, because what you don't see with the protests are all the silent majority who actually still want to not allow COVID in, and they want to push it off, and they want to have a lower death rate through better preparedness and better, vaccination rates with better vaccines and better whatever. They all have their own theories and desires. But the point is, in my experience, other than the mostly young people in major cities who are against this for valid reasons, other than those people, the general majority of Chinese people still are okay with or support pushing off COVID. So now I'm going to do something I almost never do, which is I'm going to tell you how I personally feel, rather than just talking about my opinion of what I think Chinese people are experiencing and how they may be feeling and my analysis of them. I'm going to just tell you how I feel myself. I don't care about COVID. I cared about COVID for about, I'd say 3 months or so. Once it reached America, in the news, right? It had already been in America for many months, according to the data. But once they started telling us that it was in America around February 2020, at that point I was like, well, America's not going to do anything about it. They're just going to let it spread and everyone's, going to get it. So either it's the end of the world or it's going to be another flu. And so I just kind of gave up on caring at that point. That's me personally. Now, you may notice that while my opinion and my beliefs differ from the majority of Chinese people, I still, for some reason, don't have the urge to try to tell Chinese people what to do. I don't care. Do what you're going to do. Here's how I personally feel about it. I can see all the sides involved. Here's my opinion. I really don't get why that's so controversial, but okay. Now, how do I think this is going to resolve? Well, here in Shanghai, it's been raining for a couple of days, so I don't think people are going to be doing much protesting in the rain. And I think that the message is probably received by the government that there's a lot of, especially young people in the city, who are annoyed by all this, and there's people who are sick of it. It's completely understandable. I would never in any way say that that doesn't make sense or that they're wrong. I mean, that's ridiculous. Of course, it's been tiring and trying and exhausting and draining for everyone. So what's the right solution? People who just hate China, their answer is, well, freedom, just let COVID in, and just, who cares about old people? I mean, we don't care about them in the West. Why should Chinese people care about them? What difference does it make? Let them all die. Okay, well, I guess you truly love Chinese people by pushing for a lot of Chinese people to die. I guess that's how you express it. For me, I think there's a little bit more nuance, though. There's a little bit more of a discussion. And there is no right answer. That's the key thing for people to understand. There is no right answer. Continuing the lockdowns and the COVID zero policy forever is not correct. It's not the right answer because there's many problems with it. But stopping it now is also not the right answer. There's many problems with that. And something in between. I mean, there's just no right answer. And this is why I fall back to, okay, well, I guess we should lean on legality and the Constitution. We're talking about a country. The country's name is China. The People's Republic of China is the government, which is, and the state within that region, which is tasked with running this country. So this country was set up as it is by the people. Very clearly. History proves this again and again. Sources, documents, it's very clear. The people are the ones who established this government and this country. What did they want to do? Well, they have this constitution. This constitution describes the makeup of this government and this country and this relationship between the people and the government. So what does the Constitution say? The Constitution says you can protest, you can have demonstrations, you can complain, but you cannot challenge the state and you cannot challenge those other things that I listed out. And so the only thing I can fall back on to remain neutral and to push for any kind of guidance or to give out any kind of guidance to anyone who's interested is follow the laws, follow the Constitution, and if you want to make big changes to the system, go in the system and make changes. That's how it's done. If you want to start a revolution, you'll find out that the Communist Party are the kings of revolution. You're not going to beat them. I mean, they've had the most successful and largest revolution ever in history. So whining about a phone app or so whatever, it's not, whatever the thing of the day is, forget about COVID. Whatever your particular protest or the thing that you don't like today, that's just not going to be stronger than their will. So the way to change the government is to join the government and to change it within. The way to change China is to change China from within. That's how you do it. Can you demonstrate and protest? Yes, you can. Legally, you can. As long as you're following the law and the Constitution, I will never go against you, and I think you're doing a thing that you are allowed to do. If you want me to say you're doing the right thing, that's kind of something we need to discuss, because it's not clear to me why magically everything will be fine when all of COVID spreads throughout China. It's going to happen eventually. I'm with you on that. I don't really get, it's not for me to say, and I don't really know where that balance is of when it should happen. If you're Chinese and you want to demonstrate, I'm not against you. I'll come watch, I guess, but I don't necessarily think you should or that you shouldn't. So to all you people saying I have nothing to say about protests or any of this stuff, no, I have so much to say that I almost don't know where to start, because there's so much context here. I've studied protests in China, and even especially protests in Shanghai, which there's been a lot. So anyway, that's my personal belief. I think that this COVID situation will be very different in 2023 than it is this year. And honestly, I think a lot of the reason why is actually from the Shanghai lockdowns. So I know everyone's going to think that I'm just saying this to discourage protesters. I'm not. Protest if you want to. But I personally think that these protests won't have very much influence on the 2023's COVID approach. I think that most of that will be determined by the fallout from the Shanghai lockdown and the fact that you cannot lock down Shanghai again like that. And yes, a bit of these protests, but also just the fact that it's been going on forever and it is still a problem. I think that they're going to be considering all those things when they figure out how to approach this in the coming year. So, yeah. Any super chats you guys have? Because I don't want to be on here forever. I've already gone over an hour. Hattie Woo from New Zealand. Thanks for being you. Thank you, Hattie. That's a very interesting name. Somebody who has a lot of hats. How do I close this thing? I don't know how to close it. Oh. I think I missed another one. Sorry. I don't have any moderators or anybody following to help me out. I thought that there was another super chat, but now it's just gone. Nathan, can you please touch on the possibility of foreign interference? Xavier, how dare you ask a question without sending me money? I will say this. I have a very big bombshell video that I have been unable to produce because it's just very difficult. It takes a lot of work and I just can't do it alone. And I don't have a team and I will just never be able to produce it. So I need to figure out what to do. But in this video, it's about other protests, has nothing to do with this. I can definitively prove once and for all. Thank you, VK. I don't want to lose you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hello. I can prove foreign interference in a major way in another protest that is not at all generally considered to be originating from or bolstered up by foreign interference. So what I'm saying is I can prove that there has been foreign interference and foreign insurrectionism in China in previous protests. So does that mean that that exists in all protests? No. Is that existing here in this protest? I tend to assume that there's some level of that happening, but I'm very hesitant to just constantly suggest that, it just must be foreigners, because there's a lot of very valid grievances here in China. And I just don't start from the point of view of like, it must be foreigners influencing Chinese people. I mean, Chinese people are very capable of having their own grievances and demonstrating. So I assume that there isn't, but in all reality, pretty likely. Hope that helps. Cora Sung. Cora. That's a pretty cool name. Thank you. Hong Kong. Singapore. I've got a lot of people across Asia and across the world who are wondering about these protests. I hope that you guys can take some time to read the Chinese Constitution. And when you do so, I really strongly urge you to try to just view it in a historically accurate perspective and read it in a charitable way to everyone involved. And then I think you're really going to be able to understand a lot more about the interactions in China, because there's a wealth of information, even just in the preamble. Just understanding everything that they're saying, every line is going to tell you so much about China. Xavier, you do not have to give me money later. Just share the video, make some comments, etc. It's all good. It's all good. Any other super chats, any other comments or anything? Because I'm going to head out. Subscribe to my channel. A lot of people have been saying that they're getting unsubscribed. So subscribe, etc. And by the way, if you are a YouTube member or a Patreon or Subscribe Star supporter, please let me know which kind of videos or subjects or topics you would like me to cover in the future. I probably will not, I'm not going to do it just because you say to, but I will definitely take that into consideration. I had to translate this super chat. Only by fully mobilizing wearing masks can the transmission be stopped, and now one test a day can't stop it. Too many people in China. Do you think it can be mobilized? I believe what you're asking essentially is there any way to stop the spread? If I'm understanding it, the last part's a little confusing. Personally, I think that COVID's on the brink of spreading throughout China, and I think that that's going to change 2023. But I want you to know also that I'm not an expert when it comes to virology or diseases, so you should probably take a look at other sources for predictions of the control methods and their effects. I have not been sick since 2019, so masks work and social distancing work. It's very interesting to see people try to argue against that. I'm like, I'm very old. I've never, ever not been sick this long, so it works. Nathan, what are you talking about? I hear nothing about the protests in China. I'm ending, Simon. You can rewind and stop posting again and again the same question. Anyway, thanks, everybody. I appreciate the super chats, the subscriptions, etc., etc. Cheers. Have a good one. See you next time. Subscribe, like, share, yada, yada, yada. And here's an ad. Bye, guys. Oh, one more super chat. I do not think it would be a good idea to remove all COVID restrictions, but there's a lot of people losing their economy income due to restrictions. Do you have any idea on this? Yeah. In my opinion, this is something that that really needs to be rectified, and I think the government is already incentivized to fix this situation because they don't want all of the small businesses to be destroyed. Believe it or not, they actually need small businesses much more than we do in the West. So I think they're going to have to figure out a way to help with this. But that's for another day, another subject, another video, another day. Cheers, everybody. Bye. Let me know what videos I should do the next time. And if you like these live streams, share, etc. Cheers.